All right, good evening. Thanks for coming. As you said, my name is Matt Doheny, and I am running for Congress. And which button do I hit here?
Center one in the middle.
Center one in the middle.
Yeah. Where are you going to hit the first?
Center one in the middle?
I just hit this one.
Tell me which one.
Yeah. Do that.
No, I'm saying which one do I hit going forward? Middle one? Okay. I'm running for Congress, and I thought I'd give you a little bit of overview of who I am, talk a little bit about the political situation that we're in, and then talk about issues, substance, and then, as you said, we'll definitely leave it open. First of all, why am I here? Let's just level set right here. I'm here for your help. This country's going in the wrong direction, and I'm here to each individual person to talk about where we should go as a country, and what can we do individually and collectively to go the right direction. And I have two hurdles. Number one, I got a Republican primary on June 26th. And number two, I'll have a general election against a guy named Bill Owens, who is a United States Congressman from Plattsburgh. So that's why I'm here. I want to talk about it. I am from a small town called Alexandria Bay, which is in the Thousand Islands area. It is on the Canadian border on the western side of this district, right on the St. Lawrence, right between New York State and Ontario. I did pretty well in school. I went to public high school in Alexandria Central. I went on to play football at Allegheny College. Did pretty well there. Our claim to fame is that when I was a junior, we were national champs for Division III. Now, you don't see very many Division III football games on TV. In fact, you only see one a year. That's the national championship game, so those are our claim to fame. When we won the championship, we're on ESPN, national TV. Did well in school and was able to get a scholarship to go on to Cornell Law School. And I was a corporate lawyer for 2 years. Really wasn't for me. I didn't really enjoy the practice of law in any way, shape, or form. And so for the last 13 years, is what I've been doing is being a business person as an investor. So what my specialty is getting involved and helping turn around troubled companies. Companies that are flat out distressed, bankrupt. Companies that need real leadership, that have terrible challenges, whether it be operationally, financially, or just from, who knows, a grab bag of problems. We've seen them all. That's what I do. That's how I've been successful over the last decade. And that's the type of skill set I want to bring to Congress. Now, since 2010, I'll get into that in a second, so a few things. I started my own business called North Country Capital, and basically do two things. Again, continuing my experience and dealing with companies that need to be turned around. Just one, for instance, I'm on the board of a company called YRC. And it's what you know by, you see either yellow or roadway on these big trucks going up and down, whether it's 87 or 90 or whatever. I'm on the company, it's the old yellow trucking company. It's one of the biggest trucking companies in the country. I'm on the board, helping to try to turn the company around. We'll see how it goes. And then also doing investing. And so in terms of just providing startup capital for people in the North Country, businesses that just can't get traditional financing. I've been helping and be able to assist people from trying to build homes to start embroidery companies, investing in all kinds of things in between. That's what I've been doing for the last couple of years. Also doing some civic stuff, two of which I sit on the board of the Flower Memorial Library, which is a big library in the North Country over in Watertown, and I've been teaching a little bit at Clarkson University, which is up in St. Lawrence County, in Potsdam, New York, and the local community college, which is called Jefferson Community College in Watertown. Did a lot of political work, helped a lot of candidates in 2011, and I, most importantly, got engaged on midnight and New Year's Eve, and Mary and I are getting married on June 30th. And there she is right there, sign of Mary, everybody. Let's talk politics just for a second. Why can I win? Because again, I'm here for your help. You gotta know if you're gonna invest in me with your time, effort, energy, thoughts, how are we gonna be able to do this together? So let's just take it from the top. Why can I win? Number one, this is the new district right here, the new 21st Congressional District. This is where we live in Watertown. This is where we are. That is a big piece of land, folks. 17,000 square miles, bigger than 9 states in the land. It's like running for governor of upstate. If you add in the Republican and Conservatives, 179,000 registered R's and C's. If you add in the Independence Party, that's over 200,000. Democrats, about 116,000, and about 1,500 working families, okay? The numbers speak for themselves. There's a huge discrepancy. This is, for lack of a better phrase, a Republican district. Now, let's talk about it. I ran for Congress in 2010. This was the old 23rd Congressional District, which had about 60% of this current district in it. So 40% is new. And Bill Owens, he won. I had a knockdown, drag-out primary. A great guy named Doug Hoffman and I fought it out. And he stayed on the conservative line after I won the Republican primary. And the numbers speak for themselves. He and I split about 53% of the vote. And Mr. Owens won with the smallest percentage of any winner in the country. We lined up all 435 congressmen from here down to the other part of the county building. Bill Owens would either be the first or the last, however we define it. Got the smallest percentage of vote in the entire country. And when we've been working hard, and certainly ever since the lines were redrawn in March, I've been endorsed by all the 12 individual single Republican committees. So Jefferson, Lewis, St. Lawrence, Franklin, Clinton, Essex, Hamilton, Herkimer, Warren, Washington, Saratoga. I'm one of, I'll be on the conservative party line. So that was the challenge last time. I have the conservative line. I will be on the ballot on November 6th. Similarly, I have the independence party line. I will be on the ballot on the independence party line on November 6th. And I'm one of 12 Republican young guns in the country. So that's one of the top 12 challengers. You know, we have the national people with us, and it means whatever it means, but certainly we have that support. And then you probably, I don't know if you turned on TV at some point in the last couple of weeks, and you saw, believe it or not, 6 months out, the Chamber of Commerce is running ads against my opponent. It speaks for itself. And then my opponent is on what they call their frontline program. He's one of the 15 challengers. Maybe Republicans have it as well, but one of the 15 frontline vulnerable members. A lot of the national political services have this race as a toss-up, and as I mentioned before, 40% of this district, obviously, chief of which here in Washington County, your congressman is Chris Gibson, it's not Bill Owens. Never seen an ad from him, probably never seen him. Don't know him, maybe Maury does from covering the press, but that's about it. Long story short again, it's going to be a tough race. We had a very close race last time, one of the 10 closest in the country, in fact, and we're going to have a tough one this time as well. And so that's why I'm here. I go to every single day, every single function to try to meet as many people to help them in our common cause. So that's a little snapshot as to where we are. So the first question people ask me is like, look, you ran, you lost, life goes on, why run again? And so, number one, nothing's changed since November 2010. If you really get down to the core, in terms of the direction of the country, we really haven't changed. And maybe the only thing that's really changed is the approval rating of Congress. I mean, right now, we're down to 9%, which when you know it's tough when Paris Hilton and the actual British Petroleum during the oil spill is actually outpolling you. But on top of that, I still deeply believe that our country is going in the wrong direction, led by the president and helped along by Bill Owens. Right here, this is a good stat. This is a couple months dated now, but this is a straight up question by a reputable public opinion polling firm. Is the U.S. in decline? Straight up. These numbers speak for themselves. 70% of the country, again, cuts across, doesn't matter how old you are, male, female, old, young, what have you, think we're going in the wrong direction. You hear on the street, I've been all over the Capital Land, the Adirondacks, and North Country. People truly don't think we're going in the right direction. And then, as a business person, I truly believe that we need business leaders to help go to Congress to fix the terrible morass we're in. And on top of that, my opponent, he was wrong over the past 2 years in Congress, and he's still wrong in the key policy issues facing our country. Because when you think about the 2020 election, this is where we are right now. I just think it's just fundamental. Now we have a fork in the road. We're going to basically say, are we going to be a European-style social welfare state, which is going to drive us to a collectivist state, or are we going to be an opportunity, merit-based state based upon the free market and capitalism? It is that fundamental. We have a big election, all the national elections, whether it's a little House race or the presidency of the United States. This is a decision that we as a people have to make. Now, I'll be very clear. I'm for the latter, not the former. My opponent is for the former, not the latter. And we'll get into that in a second. And then lastly, look, had a little bit of setback. I'm not going to lie, I've been successful in this life. I've worked very, very hard. And we thought we were going to win. We hoped we were going to win. We came up a little bit short. Obviously, we had a different set of circumstances. It wasn't a one-on-one race. But you know what? That's the definition of character. You get knocked down, you get back up. Someone scores on you, you get back on the ice, try to stop the next puck. That's the mentality, and that's the skill set and mentality I bring, and I can bring to you in Congress. So, where are we at right now? So, there's a million sub-issues that we're going to get asked about in the next 6 months. But really, I think the two challenges of today, this is what faces our country, are the two problems of growth and debt. We can summarize, and I'll go into that, but those are the two words we're going to talk about a lot. Now, first of all, we're talking about growth. Right now, we have unemployment that's way too high. And so everybody wants to run around and talk about jobs, jobs, jobs. You're going to hear my opponent talk about jobs, jobs, jobs. But look, it takes growth. And when we're talking about what is economic growth, it's very simple. It's easy to say. Increasing the capacity of the economy to produce goods and services. Hey, guys. Now, what does growth do? Growth actually forces employers and people who have the opportunity to create jobs to actually hire, Get people on the payroll. Guess what? If you're shrinking, you don't do that. It's common sense, but it's fundamental. And when growth leads to a larger gross domestic product, and actually lead to the collective rising of our boats. Now, let's take a look at what history says here. This is zero growth. This means nothing's growing. This is the Obama record right here. Okay? This is horrible. This is not good. Last year, gross domestic product only grew by 1.8%. It's not to keep up with inflation. It's not to keep up with people coming online in the job market. We're not growing fast enough. It is a fundamental problem. Well, why does that mean? Look, let's talk a comparison. This is not even a partisan question, right? So let's think about Obama, which we just saw, then Reagan, and even Clinton. You see this growth? This is where we're supposed to be, 4, 5, 6% growth. That after a deep recession, we need to have that type of growth to lift us up. Why hasn't it happened? I think we all know. When you have bailouts, when you have stimulus, when you have Obamacare, it keeps the job creators on the sideline. It keeps people who are entrepreneurial, who will provide capital, provide ideas from saying, you know what, let's jump on. That probably, a lot of my friends are waiting for November 2012. Let's see what happens with the election. But this right here is why we are where we are. We need more growth. So what does that mean for us locally? Okay, this is the unemployment as of today. Numbers are for April. And it's unacceptable. Now, Washington County is on the lower side. Remember, the national unemployment rate is 8.1. We have 8.5. When you look at part of the other district here, whether you're in Hamilton or Jefferson or Lewis, we have double-digit unemployment all over the place. For the life of me, I don't understand why you would send, whether it's the president or congressman, back to his job when there's double-digit unemployment in your county or area. It makes no sense. When you have unemployment that's higher than the national average, unemployment here in Washington County that's higher than the state average. It makes no sense. These things matter. I mean, I tour businesses all the time, and we say, get to people like, hey, you know, how is it possible for you to grow your business? The answer is not how you grow your business. Like, how about we just try to maintain? How about you just try to get government a little bit out of the way, give me a little bit more of an opportunity to go ahead and earn my living and continue to do what I do as a business person. It doesn't really matter what you do. What we want business people and entrepreneurs to take the risk and to grow. And that's the challenge we have right now. And so let's talk about what those policies mean. Overall, if you think about unemployment rates, this is the unemployment rate. This is what I call, this is the underemployment rate, the gray line right here. And so whether it's 8, 8.5, 9, 10, or 11, the real unemployment rate is closer in the teens. It's 15, it's 16%. Why? A lot of people just give it up. They just checked out. Number 2, people get paid under the table, you know, off the grid. And number 3 is that people who are underemployed, who still are working but they're not using the full productive capacity, what they're actually supposed to be doing. That's the real challenge we face right here, not only as a county, not only as a congressional district, but as a country. Numbers speak for themselves. But again, what can Congress do? Well, first thing, do no more harm. But what does that mean practically? Look, number 1, let's talk about regulation for a second. We've got to remove the excessive regulation. What does that mean? Let's give an example. Okay? There's a thing, and RAINS, R-E-I-N-S, is an acronym. I don't know what it stands for, but here's the point. That the Congress and the United States House of Representatives, the RAINS Act came up for a vote. And what is the RAINS Act does something simple. Take a step back by way of example. You pass a law, and the law says, it doesn't even matter what it says, and that law needs to get implemented in terms of actually the practical reality of it. So it goes to the relevant government agency, Department of Labor, Health and Human Services, EPA, what have you. And they come up with a series of rules. Okay? And those rules get sent out, and there's comments, and then when they come up with the final rules, it goes to both houses of Congress. Now those rules from that agency only get approved, only in every situation except for one, where both houses of Congress at the same time, both basically essentially veto it. Now, you high school students, how many times does that happen? That's right, 0. Okay? What does the RAINS Act do? It flips it over. It says any regulation that has impact on the United States economy of more than $100 million has to come back and get voted on by the House. So it does not become law, doesn't become an effective regulation until the House gives it enough vote. Okay? Changes the fundamental nature. Now, you might say to yourself, $100 million, you know, that seems like a pretty big number. Now, certainly it's a big number. But when there's 313 million Americans, and you realize 100 million is pretty much any rule that has any real impact on us whatsoever. And it will fundamentally change the rules, because guess what? Now a congressman can't hide behind and say, well, you know, I don't agree with that, but, you know, I can't stop the bureaucracy. You know, I don't really agree with that, but, you know, that just happened. That was a rule handed up by the Department of Labor. Fill in your favorite agency. It's fundamental. Now, your current congressman voted in favor of the REINS Act. Bill Owens voted against. It is a clear choice. You cannot be for regulatory reform and vote against common sense measures like the REINS Act, which take these bureaucratic decisions into public view and actually make it an up or down vote and have people like yourselves, constituents, say, are you for or against this particular regulation? It's fundamental. We can't change the regulatory world and help the job creators without doing this. And on top of that, let's just have to say, you know what, maybe we have enough rules for a while. Just have to stop the voluminous amount of rules. I mean, you've heard all the stories where if we stacked up all the rules from the IRS or so on and so forth, it would be taller than I am. These are all true, but we need to stop and get back under control here. Number two, promote free trade and investment. I mean, right now, when you have the #1 issue of the day, job creation, what I call growth, when you need to make sure that we have every opportunity, we need to make sure, look, we live close to Canada here. I mean, I grew up right on the Canadian border. And so whether it's Watertown area or Plattsburgh area, or even down this far, it's only a couple hours. It's huge. The amount of impact that when people from whether it's Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, can actually bring to the area. The amount of investment that can make. Because guess what? It takes capital, people, and ideas to come together at the same time to go ahead and create the opportunity where we have jobs. That's just how it works. And the other side does not agree with me. They are fundamentally wrong. That is how the economy drives. And if you go ahead and limit yourself and don't have the ability to do things, especially on a border, you're putting yourself in a bad position. Number three, and Mary will kill me for a double negative, but it says remove tax disincentives, right? Okay? I'm not saying give tax incentives, because again, government needs to get out of the business of picking winners and losers. But you have to remove disincentives. I'll talk a little bit later in the presentation. But when our corporate tax rate is 35% in the U.S., and when the average of the Western world is 25%, when certain countries like Canada and Ireland are in the teens, guess what happens? Businesses go elsewhere. We have to at least get a level playing field and how the strengths and the dynamic nature of the American economy take care of itself. But guess what? You tie one hand behind even the greatest boxer's back, he's going to have a hard time winning the heavyweight prize fight. Next, provide stability and confidence, which really goes hand in hand with ending the fiscal mess in Washington. And this is really, like what economists will say, is really sort of the, it's really a challenge in terms of what are you signaling to investors. Say, look, U.S. doesn't have its fiscal house in order. U.S., we don't really have the stability in Washington in terms of what's going to happen policy-wise. And so people who can commit capital, people who can invest in meaningful enterprises, small and large, all over the world, it sends the wrong signal to those people saying, you know what, in the U.S., maybe you should hold off. Maybe we need an election. Maybe we're going to continue to go in a direction like Greece. It sends the wrong message, and that needs to change. And that can change immediately. So, why is growth important? Growth will continue to have people lead better lives. And guess what? Here's a little secret. If businesses are making more money, they're paying more taxes. Simple as that. We'll get more revenue. It will help with our overall challenge of the second part, which is debt. Now, we can't simply grow our way out. It's a big piece of it. It's a big piece. But we need to deal with the debt. Okay? Right now, let's talk about facts. Today, the U.S. national debt is $15.7 trillion. It's just a fact. In the past fiscal year, we brought in $2.3 trillion. That's a big number, people. $2.3 trillion. But we sent out, we spent $3.6 trillion. That's a $1.3 trillion deficit. Now you hear these numbers, and you've heard them all before. I'm sure it's not the first time. And I've talked to people, all over this district, and it doesn't really mean that much because these numbers are so big and so many zeros. But I say, let's drop some zeros here. Okay? Let's drop some zeros. Let's actually drop 8 zeros. So I put it in personal terms. Let's say it's you, or your buddy down the street, or your long-lost brother. And so he's got $157,000 on his credit card already. He made 23 grand last year. He spent 36, and so it means he's got 13 grand in a new credit card debt. And oh, by the way, he told you for the next 10 years, I'm going to probably be $10,000 in the hole every year for the next 10 years. Because would you lend that guy money? Who's going to lend that person money? Okay, that's what's going on right now. And as I mentioned, look, the future with President Obama is equally dark. Let's look at the numbers. This is what his baseline budget is, right? According to the Congressional Budget Office, right? If you take the average of it, it's going to be over the next 10 years, $1 trillion. That's just average. He's not hiding. That's why the 2012 election is so fundamental. But let's talk historical as well. I probably should have put a chart up here. Let's turn the clock back 100 years. So it's 2012 to 1912. The U.S., obviously an emerging power, but not everybody wanted our U.S. Treasury bonds at the time. Not every transaction was done in U.S. dollars. A lot of it was done in pounds. The UK was still, probably the #1 power in the world, if not, one of the few. Same thing with France and the franc. But guess what? Like we have right now, we have what they call the exorbitant privilege. Everybody wants dollars. Everybody wants our bonds. And the moment that that trend ends, the moment that, we can't just continue to print money but through the Federal Reserve. The moment that China and the oil countries and the Arabian countries don't show up and say, we're going to go ahead and buy your entire bond issue when you issue treasury bonds, or whether it's 1 month or 30-year bonds, and anywhere in between, it will negatively impact us in a fundamental way. That's what's going on in Greece right now. This is not fake. This is real. These numbers speak for themselves. And this is what the challenge is of the time. We need to grow, because again, if you just have austerity without growth, it's pretty challenging. But at the same time we grow our economy, we have to get back to equilibrium. We simply cannot spend $1 trillion more every year than we bring in and think that somehow Greece is this crazy situation in Europe that can't happen. And when we see what's going to happen with them, and you put Portugal and Ireland and Spain, and the list goes on and on behind it, it's fundamental to how we're going to live. It's truly the challenge of our time. The good news, we have time. The bad news, right now we're not handling the situation. So we got to have a balanced budget every year. And I'm not one to be starting around amending the Constitution, but if we have to amend it to get a balanced budget, so be it. We have to deal with and restructure entitlements for the long term. This is just a practical reality. And if we don't stop our spending, as I already said, it's eventually going to change our way of life. Congress and the President's got to lead. This is the key issue of the 2012 elections. It's fundamental. If not, let's take a look at other countries. Now, you see where Greece is. You see where Italy, Portugal, we talked about that. Now, Japan has had a lost decade. They've been decades without growth. Just stagnant. Can you imagine the U.S. is stagnant? That's where it could happen. That's the best case. Worst case, we have this craziness what we have going on in Greece, where the whole nature, is Greece going to pull out of the EU? Are they going to be removed from the euro in terms of a currency? That's unthinkable things, not that long ago, that are practically playing out right now in the European continent. And say, well, we're America, we're different. You're right, we are America, we're different. But it's only because every single time over the course of our history we met the challenge. The question is, will we make the challenge? Will we actually confront the true challenge? Or we're just going to kick the can down the road until the can cannot get kicked any longer. And at that point, we have some very, very, very painful decisions to make that will be made by other people, known as our creditors and people who don't want to have our currency anymore. It's a huge difference. So that's the backdrop. Those are the twin challenges. Now, I just want to talk briefly about the word security and how it's going to play out, and talk about 4 of the key campaign issues that we're going to see over the course of the next 5.5 months. Energy, national health, and then economic security here. So let's take it from the top here with energy security. If there's one issue, I got to tell everybody, like I've been doing this, I announced in September, we changed, we actually have a little bit of a new district since March, but I've been out here for 6 months. And with gas prices today, $3.80 in the low side of the district, and actually some places it's higher than $4 in the Adirondacks or what have you. We've got to change our federal policy, okay? When your next door neighbor is 20 miles away, gas prices matter. When you go to work, it takes you 45 to 50 minutes to commute one way, like you do all over this district, energy prices matter. So let's break it down. Let's talk about the facts here, okay? Always very I am a data-driven businessman. So let's talk about it. There are 42 gallons of oil in each barrel. Okay? That's what oil is priced on the barrel. At $100 a barrel, just to pick an even number here, that raw material costs $2.38 per gallon. Okay? This is just facts. Yeah, you got to add in the cost of refinement. You got to move the oil. Not everything, not every small town has got a refinery. And obviously, nobody works for free. It might be small and skinny, but you got to have retail profit. And oh, by the way, let's bring in the government writ large. Taxes here in New York State are 67.5 cents per gallon. Thank God for California, otherwise we'd be #1 in terms of that awful number. 41.9 for state, 18.4 for the federal folks. Okay? So when you start thinking gas prices need to go down, this is the practical reality. Now, if that's not tough enough, you got to factor in the weak dollar courtesy of the Fed. Okay? So let's just go through, very simple. Oil is priced in dollars. So if you have 100, let's just say you have 1 barrel at $1. Okay? And if the Fed starts printing money, that $1 actually is only worth 70 cents, guess what happens? See where the price of oil is? Do you see where the actual value of the dollar is? Oil just became more expensive. Simple as that. Oil is priced in dollars. A weak dollar drives up everyone's cost, especially the people who can least afford to actually go to the pump or have the most challenging time with their own financial situation. Gas prices just got more expensive with a weak dollar. It's just fundamental. Now, certainly, you know, we have global supply and demand on top of that. That's not more challenging enough. And guess what? OPEC, other people who are not actually technically in OPEC, you know, they're not necessarily our friends, and they negatively impact global supply and demand. That is the challenge right now with a lot of our people who fill up in the tank. And you know what? That might be their leading economic indicator. Where are we at with gas prices? Because it affects my life, going to work every day, so much. So, what are we going to do about it? First of all, we have to change the supply and demand quotient. You're going to drill holes in the ground, you got to have production. We have an unbelievable untapped reservoir, all in the continental 48, as well as offshore in Alaska and beyond. Pipelines, things that the president will not do. A Keystone pipeline that brings oil from the tar sands in Alberta all the way down to Cushing, Oklahoma, and down to the Gulf. He won't do it. He vetoed it. It's crazy. We got to reduce ancillary costs, high taxes. We just went through that burden, and difficulty permitting. If you want to build a refinery, the last time we put a refinery in the United States was in the mid-70s. Just shockingly hard to do. And guess what? We have to change monetary policy. I know it's complicated. It's not something you see on the nightly news because I don't think they understand it. But until you get a strong dollar, or at least a stronger dollar going, we're going to have challenges in terms of the price of oil globally. It's just as that simple. Now, let's move on. National security. Again, we talked about energy security, national security. Look, I deeply believe in strong national defense. You know, we need to reform our military budget, but you know what? Cutting $1 trillion, like Congressman Owens and the president want to do, it's not right for America. We got to make sure that we have the number of forces and the preparedness, the training, the mechanical skills to make sure that we have the equipment to win. But by cutting 150,000 soldiers, that puts our security at jeopardy. That is job number one, to make sure that we're safe. I said, look, I'm a turnaround guy. I can tell you that if I ever got to look at the Defense Department budget in terms of not just what they print publicly, but the mechanics involved, there's plenty of fat to cut. There's plenty of things that could be redone. There's no doubt about that. But to go ahead and unilaterally start locking up hundreds of billions of dollars is going to make us weaker. And we never want to go back to places where we think we're weak. Now, when you think about the budget, you got to take the little history. This goes back all the way to the founding. This is post-World War II average, right? We cannot underinvest in defense. President Reagan taught us that. We need to maintain a robust, strong defense. It's that fundamental. That's why we have a federal government. Number three, let's move on to challenges where we see some of the other domestic policies. So when we're talking about health care, we say everybody knows the health care bill was passed in 2010. So let's talk about what's happened since then. So we have, I just think, 4 little gems, okay? In and of themselves, you know, not going to change the future of our country, but it gives you an example of passing a law that you don't know what's in there that's wrong for the country. So number one, and this is another lesson we've learned here, banning the excise tax. Okay, this is a tax, a lot of these taxes come online, as well as Obamacare itself, in 2013 and 2014. So this is a tax, a 10% tax on all tanning beds, okay? And it began in July 2010. And so the estimate was that it was going to bring in $200 million. Okay, guess what? The first 9 months, it brought in 1/4 of that. Okay. Milton Friedman, Nobel laureate economist, told us a little thing. If you want less of something, tax it. Okay, simple as that. Perfect example. Number two, even the wild liberals had to get involved with the second one, which is repealing the 1099 tax reporting rules. This was a situation where any transaction you did that was over, I guess it was $600 or $700, had to get reported to the IRS. And that's insanity. They passed this, always passed this. Even the wild liberals had to say, whoa, Nelly, and that got backed up. And then the Class Act, which again, this was another sort of tribute to Ted Kennedy in terms of long care living. And it just totally was going to bust through it. Even, you know, Secretary of Health and Human Services, Kathleen Sebelius, former governor of Kansas, said, we just can't do this. And the House did vote to repeal it. And then lastly, the medical device tax. Now, for all you Sun-tanning fans, that is Snooki, and that is the Speaker of the House. Both very tan individuals. When you talk about a killer medical device tax, right? It's the in Obamacare, the 2.3% excise tax on revenue of all manufacturing of medical devices. Okay, and I said this. It's at least a 15% tax on average in businesses' profit. Owens voted for this by voting for a company. Let's talk about a real life example, right? CR Bar, you guys heard of it? Local company. They had revenue globally of almost 2.9 billion. The U.S. revenue a little less than $2 billion. Right, so 2.3 excise tax in terms of U.S. revenue gets you about $44 million. Their net income was approximately $221 million. So you see the math. On the U.S. profit, you have $44 million on net income is almost 20% tax on profit. Now, again, I love to say, and you'll hear me say this for the next 5.5 months, you can't love jobs and hate the job creators. Oh, well, a little 2.3% tax on, on revenue, that's nothing. I'll just take it off the top. When it eats into whether it's 20, 15, 50% of your profits, how does that compel? How does that get a company? How does that get entrepreneurs and business people excited to go out and grow? And guess what? We need growth to create jobs. How does it do that? It doesn't. It's a job killer. It's common sense. My opponent voted for it. Now, to be fair, he has seen the light. He's seen the light. He's now co-sponsored a bill to go ahead and undo this. He wants to overturn this. He's joined with a lot of other Republicans in a bill that hopefully will pass the House and hopefully pass the Senate to undo this. But the point is that he waited a year and a half until we had a new district to realize, guess what? Medical devices and those companies are very important in this area, in this district, and so now we should do something about it. But guess what? Not every company has an interest here in the 21st Congressional District. And you know what? The practical reality is that this is a perfect example of how tax policy can create the negatives that will keep people on the sidelines, keep capital from forming, and keep people from taking the risk that will lead to job creation. This, my friends, is a perfect example. So, what do we do about healthcare now that we had a little sideline with the 4 things? Well, I'm on record. I want to repeal Obamacare. But let's talk about what's going to happen going forward. Look, number one, we're going to have a big decision. Somewhere between now and sort of the first 2 weeks in July, the Supreme Court's going to rule on, is Obamacare constitutional? Does it violate the Commerce Clause? There's the idea that you just sit under your couch eating Cheetos the rest of your life, never move, never leave Granville or Fort Anne or Fort Edward, can you go ahead and get taxed by never having any interstate commerce? We'll find out. It's probably unconstitutional, but we'll let the experts, and we'll certainly see what the 9 judges say. But either way, what are we going to do going forward? Whether we have to repeal it legislatively or it gets overturned by the courts. And let's go forward here. We've got to focus on a system where the patient's in control of his decisions. Because guess what? Obamacare was simply a way station on the way to a single payer system, i.e. government controlling all of it. We need to make sure patients are in control of their treatment. This is fundamental. This is the very definition of freedom. Next, we're going to align incentives between payers, providers, and consumers. When the people who are paying are the ones treating, and the ones who are paying are the ones being treated, you have terrible disincentives. Terrible disincentives. We'll talk about that in a second. Next, you got to promote pricing transparency for the market to work. What does that mean? You go into the grocery store, Cheetos, Wheaties, Cantaloupe, you see the pricing, you know exactly what the market's telling you. You go back every week, price of Cantaloupe goes $1, it tells you something. Maybe it's a bad crop, maybe some sort of tariff, who knows what the case is. Maybe people just don't want, maybe everybody wants Cantaloupe, maybe all those supply and demand things come through, and that's what the pricing transparency teaches us, okay? Healthcare, it doesn't. When somebody else is paying the tab, whether you have government through Medicare, Medicaid, TRICARE, whether you have your own insurance through work, and even if you're self-insured in some respect, there's no pricing transparency. You have to blow my knee out and say, God forbid, rip my ACL. I mean, it's not like you sit down and have a long discussion about what things cost. Now, of course, you have to fix yourself. But when you remove the pricing discipline which the market provides from healthcare, any other thing which is not healthcare specific, any instrument, you're going to have tough choices. Next, from a consumer, we're all consumers here standpoint, we got to allow consumers to go across state line. And right now, 2 of the biggest challenges is if there is a perfect insurance policy for you in Colorado, guess what? It is against the law for you to have insurance from that Colorado company. Secondly, we're subject to whatever the Department of Insurance and whatever government agency has an impact on pricing of New York State health, insurance policies. One size fits all. It's very little. You can't just get a very, very low dollar catastrophic care policy. There's very, very few choices. It makes a huge difference. And then lastly, look, we don't live in the most metropolitan area of the world. Doesn't matter how close you are to Albany or Syracuse or Montreal or Ottawa. We need more doctors in rural areas. Again, what I'm deathly afraid of And I visited in the old district every hospital, and I aim to do the same in the new district. Every CEO of the hospital, I said, what are your two biggest challenges? I said, well, obviously funding and reimbursement, bad care, charity care. And number two, recruitment and retention of doctors. Well, guess what? Government takes over healthcare. We have all these challenges that don't get resolved. I just have a bad feeling that all of a sudden that's a negative to try and get not only more doctors involved, but actually more doctors involved to areas, whether it's Fort Ann, whether it's Glens Falls, whether it's Watertown or beyond. And so sum up, if you think healthcare is expensive now, wait till you see when it's free. And this is just a little chart of the actual almost, Rube Goldberg Byzantine chart of how it's all going to work when government takes over. This is going to happen if Obamacare is not either overturned by the courts or overturned through the legislative process. So before we get to tax reform, the last point in terms of health care, look, I'm going to talk a lot about it. It's going to be a big issue. My opponent voted for it. It was his first vote in Congress, and he voted for it twice. He defends it, and no matter what he says in terms of carving out, whether it's the 1099 medical device act, like he was for it, he's defended it to the core. And this gives you a little insight as to what do you believe the role of government is in your life. And so, if you say to yourself, you know what, I think the government does a great job, I think they should be single payer, they run everything, and just everything will be covered. I just disagree. The outcomes are going to be bad, worse for patients, and at some point in time you'll have this awful thing where people who can't, it's going to take X amount of months to get, you'll have this private market that will create outside of the public market, and you already start to see some doctors say, you know what, I'm not taking Medicare and Medicaid patients. All right. That's what's going to happen. It's not right for the country. Lastly, economic security. Tax reform. We need flatter and simpler. Right now, as I mentioned before, the average corporate tax rate in the world for Western countries is 25. Ours is 35. I have a brother who is a little over a year younger than I am. He works for a company called Cooper Industries, and he's in Syracuse, New York. And 3 or 4 years ago, his company, which was U.S.-based, Houston headquartered, they moved. They moved to Ireland. They became an Irish company. Ireland has a 12.5% corporate tax rate. The U.S. is at 35. And that's below the line net income. What you take out for taxes is what you distribute to shareholders. That's a almost 25% difference. It's a huge difference. Again, when I'm saying we don't need to have tax incentives, we just have to remove the disincentives. These things happen every day. It's fundamental. It's reality. It's simple as that. We need to get that. And on top of that, look, and this is for any of you farmers out there, the death tax, right? You just create all this wealth, and you reinvest in the business, and you grow your farm, you have more acreage, and you have more head of cattle, and so on and so forth. And guess what? The moment that you pass away, no matter how much you paid in taxes, how much you paid in sales and property taxes, school taxes, and all the like, the death tax comes and gets you. And that's how farms get sold. That's how businesses don't continue on. I think it's just wrong, flat out, and we have to abolish the death tax. And so lastly, it gives you a little snapshot over there in terms of whether it's individual, excise, corporate, and payroll taxes, how we're funding the actual $2.3 trillion. Again, we have a spending problem in Washington. $2.3 trillion can fund just about every vital program. So let's wrap up. I want to save time for questions here. But let's just talk about the reality here. I just came to 10 things, and there's many, many more here. Let's go through the tail of the tape here between Mr. Owens and myself. He votes and defends Obamacare. I promise I will vote to overturn Obamacare. He wants to raise taxes. He's in favor of this foolish Buffett rule. I will not raise your taxes. I will make sure that taxes are flatter and simpler. Government simply has to get out of the business of picking winners and losers, and the best way to do that is through all these expenditures and offsets through the tax code. Number 3, as I mentioned before, my opponent does not want to truly change the regulatory situation and rein in regulations. He voted against the REINS Act. There's no one you can't get away from that vote. It's fact. I would vote in favor of the REINS Act and be a champion of trying to get real regulatory reform and transparency so people understand that. 4, he's in favor of cap and trade. We don't talk about that much anymore, but it's still big. It's basically a carbon tax. I am dead set against against cap and trade. 5, he wants to gut our military by over $500 billion. I will be an advocate of our military. It's why we pay taxes, why we have a federal government. 6, he's in favor of subsidies. He defended the Solyndra investment. It's unbelievable. The stimulus and bailout, same thing. He thinks they're good ideas. Any business person knows that it is shockingly hard to take a group of people, assets, and ideas and bring them together and to sell that product or services, and through the process to make a little bit of profit. It's so hard to do. So hard to do. It's so hard to create that kind of wealth. Well, you know what? It's easy to destroy. That Solyndra, $500 million, is gone forever. Never coming back. As simple as that. time and time again, when you have inefficient allocation of resources, that guess what? Congressmen like Bill Owens and the federal government can do time and time again. You are going to continue to have bad decisions being made in capital and resources. In this case, our tax dollars lost like that. Oh, by the way, he's in favor of all that. I am dead set against it. He not only is in favor of it, but promotes card check and project labor agreements. These things are job killing. Okay? When it comes to card check, I was at a business today, and we spent almost 40 minutes talking about card check. The impact of what will that do to not have a secret ballot, to actually have a situation where a union can come in and try to bring in a union at the site that's not unionized right then and there. It will have a huge impact, and that's, you want to talk about job loss? So a company is just getting away. Card check is a terrible policy that would lead to that. I'm against it. Now for you people who are more tech-minded, okay, my opponent has been a sponsor of SOPA and CISPA, okay? Stop Online Piracy Act. Now you might remember this winter, there was a day where if you went on Google, it was blacked out. If you went on Wikipedia, it was down. And that was these industries coming together and saying, you know what, the Stop Online Piracy Act is truly censoring the internet, and they wanted to stop it. Okay? Bill Owens was in favor of that. I came out early against it, said this is un-American, for God's sakes. It's against our First Amendment, it's against our Constitution. That all happened, the tech world rose up, didn't become law. Same thing with the CISPA. These things are challenges to our very core and freedom. I'm dead set against it. My opponent wants to repeal the Defense of Marriage Act and is in favor of gay marriage. I'm the opposite way. And lastly, you can claim to be a big NRA guy, you can claim to be in defense of your Second Amendment, but guess what? He's going to support Barack Obama, and he will vote, in his first vote in the new Congress, he will vote for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House. Let's be very clear. If you vote for Obama, and if you have the opportunity to vote for Nancy Pelosi for Speaker of the House, you are not in support of gun rights. It's just that simple. These two people want to take away our guns. These two people want to change our relationship, that's core basic freedom of the Second Amendment, to ourselves, and say, you know what, maybe we'll give you guns, maybe we won't. They don't believe that I believe that your Second Amendment right is pure, and you should have guns if you want to. Now, with that, I can talk all night, but you know what, it's probably best I keep working and keep listening here. So, thanks for listening, appreciate it.
Go ahead, people. Any questions? That's what he's here for.
Well, if I could just, well, go ahead. Sorry, ma'am.
Would you defund the UN?
The United Nations, well, we know the challenges, right? When you have a UN Security Council where you have Libya and Syria, these not clearly countries that not only do tyranny, but obviously don't believe in the rule of law and actually kill their own citizens. You have to say we have to have a fundamental rethink of the UN. And a lot of ways. Number one, as you probably know, we as a country, we provide about, I don't know, 25, 1/4 of the actual UN budget. I mean, it's crazy. And so in terms of the core question, look, we need to make sure we have relations with other countries. In terms of, is the UN the actual way to do it? I'm not so sure about that, to be honest with you. There's got to be another way. And certainly we need relations, bilateral, multilateral. But the UN really has not generated a lot of positive returns for the citizens of the country.
Do you support Agenda 21?
Absolutely not. I would hope anybody in this room, other than our tracker here, if they support Agenda 21, you're in the wrong room, for God's sakes. But let's just talk about what that means practically, right? It's just slowly creeping, right? There's no Agenda 21 on the side of the highway, right? There's not an Agenda 21, at least I'm not aware of, other than a UN conference. Talk about Agenda 21. It's a slowly creeping noise of the globalists that want to just have government continue to take over our lives and run our families and run our government, right? We have to stop it. But you know what? It starts right now in the U.S. in terms of the 2012 election. People who believe in freedom, people who believe in liberty. Look, a lot of Republicans are against me on SOPA and CISPA, to be very clear. For me, that is just point-blank liberty. You need to make sure that we have freedom and liberty. We have rights and responsibilities as well, but freedom and liberty. When you have things like Agenda 21, it's that slow blob that kind of just tries to emanate out of the UN and that whole globalist crowd. And I'm dead set against it.
What about Lost?
About what?
What about Lost?
What about Lost?
Yeah.
TV show Lost?
The treaty that they, that's up. The treaty about the seas.
Oh, you're talking about that, that's topical right now, right? The
Law of the see.
Love to see, I'll be honest with you, I don't know enough to give you an answer. Sorry about that.
Saying that you want jurisdiction.
Yeah, I just don't know the details, so I just want to give a definite answer.
Easy question. What, can you tell us what firearms you own? You say you're for the Second Amendment, but do you own firearms?
You know, one of the things Mary had to get used to is that in our home in Watertown that we sleep pretty close to a shotgun. And so that gives you a little indication that, you know, I believe in freedom, but I also believe in personal ability to defend yourself, my friend. Question? Sir?
Matt, there are a lot of things, like you said, that are creeping in our society. They're kind of off the radar. And one of the things for especially older people is the interest rates. Because the interest rates right now for a bank is like 0.1%.
Yep.
Our 10-year bond is dropped to, I think, 1.7%.
Correct.
It's still dropping.
Yep.
So what do you think is the role of government to keep interest rates so low? And like Federal Reserve and
Right, so his question is you know, we have these remarkably low interest rates. And all interest rates are just derived by the United States Treasury bond. That's what I talked about a little bit earlier, right? Everybody wants, that is the quote-unquote only risk-free, or at least one of the risk-free investments in the world. And so that's one thing if the market, you know, clears. And so if people say, you know what, 1 month or 10-year or 30-year risk, i.e. when you get repaid by the government, and we'll have a price for that, right? But that isn't the way it works, because we have a thing called the Federal Reserve, right? Now, this is getting very technical, and if I lose you, I apologize, we'll stay here all night talking about it. But the Federal Reserve came in 1913, right? We did not have a central bank before 1913. We had a couple iterations of that, but I guess they always got pulled out and they failed. And with 1913, by the way, was a tough year, because we had the Federal Reserve and the 16th Amendment. You know what the 16th Amendment gave us, right? The income tax. Tough year in 1913. And so right now we have a situation where ever since, I forget when the bill was passed, but I think it's in the 1970s, that there's actually a dual mandate for the Federal Reserve, right? It's supposed to keep inflation low and employment high. Now, sometimes those things do conflict. Because right now the policy of the unelected Federal Reserve Board, led by Ben Bernanke, is basically to keep interest rates free. I mean, they can't, you know, you can't have government paying people to basically, you know, paying other people to borrow money from you, okay? But essentially we do, because we'll buy, the Treasury, the Federal Reserve buys back bonds. So what does that all mean? Right now we have a policy that interest rates will stay zero, which means we talk about people who live on fixed income and other things, shockingly low returns, that are not market driven at all. This is not the market. This is what we, right now, last year, scary stat, that 70% of Treasury debt, i.e. bonds sold by the United States, is bought by the Federal Reserve. Okay, 70%. Not China, us. Okay? Huge difference. So we have to end the dual mandate. Okay, we have to end the dual mandate. But secondly, look, it calls into the fundamental question of the Federal Reserve. And the Federal Reserve, like right now, to have one unelected guy or a group of the Federal Open Market Committee, unelected people, to say that they know the economy. We're not tethered to a gold standard anymore. No basket of currency. I mean, we are out there, a fiat currency, just printing money. And to think that we're not going to have inflation is out of control. Right now, the reason that we have interest rates so low, which is why we don't have inflation right now, is because of the challenge we saw in terms of growth in the economy. But guess what? When things start kicking up again, we will have inflation. It's just the law of economics. It's simple as that. And again, one of the things that I'm deeply worried about is not only that the world's reserve currency somehow doesn't become the U.S. Not only will people stop buying our treasury bonds, but the practical reality is that we have this huge inflation. That's what you see. You've seen it in all kinds of banana republics all over the world since time immemorial. And guess when you have inflation, when you go to the store, and guess what? Things cost 30% more than the day before, and so on and so forth. You talk about a real change of our American life? Whew! I don't want to see that. So we have to rein in the Fed. We have to do something fundamentally different. And in Congress, look, I understand the issues. I will be able to do something about it. Because guess what? Free money for everybody is going to lead to higher prices, whether it be currently at the pump or in the future, just through inflation for everybody in the room. And that truly is, if you think about a generational shift, basically making sure all asset prices stay stable now, but whether it's 2, 10, or 20 years in the future, whoosh, prices go up, that is a tough bargain, my man. Tough bargain.
So Matt, does that mean you would abolish the Federal Reserve?
Yep.
How are you, what's your thought on term limits?
My thought on term limits is twofold. Number one, look, the greatest term limits is people can just vote the bumps out. But you know what? It's hard. It's hard. It's hard. No, it doesn't happen.
Because guess what?
Wait, hold on, wait.
I like my guy. That's the other guy that we don't like. My guy's the good guy, so we'll keep him there.
Exactly. Look, the power of incumbency is very, very challenging. Now, it does happen, right? Think even at the highest level, United States Senate primary.
Why
In
did
Indiana, they
why
got
did
rid of Dick
vote-
Luke.
Why did they put Harry Reid back? I mean, prime example. Why did they put Harry Reid back in? I mean, anybody in their right mind.
Well, the
really-
people vote him in, that's in the case.
That's my point.
You're in the right room tonight, that's good.
They keep on.
But the second reason is, like, I do believe in term limits, that, like, and I believe term limits is just a practical matter that, look, I'm a young guy, 41. Like, I can stay in Congress like Charlie Rangel for 40 years, and that's the last thing on earth I want and you what you need. That somehow I'm the only guy in this new 21st congressional district that can take care of this district for the next 40 years is absolutely garbage. It just is. But you know what? Whether it's 3, 4, 5 terms, 6 terms, that's fine. So I spend and do a good job for a decade and move along. That's great. On to somebody else. That's fine. But you have to have these situations where you don't have a Dick Lugar, you don't have a Bob Berg, God rest his soul, you don't have Charlie Rangel, where these guys are there for 40 and 50 years, where it becomes almost a hereditary thing. Like, okay, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. So that's why, I believe that people have the true ability to get rid of people. That's the real term limit check. But, we need term limits. Now, like there's practical challenge. Remember back in the early 90s, the term limit cases got to the Supreme Court. And they got overturned. Remember that, right? Okay. So there's practical realities to how far can we go with this. But I do believe in term limits, and whether it's 8 years or 10 years or 12 years max, two U.S. Senate terms, so it's 12 years or 6 in the House. I think that's about enough. You get the hang of the place. You can do good for your citizens. And you know what? You can vote the right way. Because this is one thing that I get asked all over the district. It doesn't matter if you're in downtown Watertown or in Queensbury or anywhere in between. It's like, how are you going to make a difference? You know what? How you make a difference is vote the right way and speak the truth. Okay? And guess what? If you're planning on a 50-year congressional career, you're speaking your own version of the truth that's going to allow you the ability to take that 50 years in the House or in the Senate or whatever the case might be. That's not me. I'm a business guy. I've never been elected to anything in my life. Never. I'm here to do what's right for the country and to make sure we promote the interests of the 21st district. In that order.
That's gonna change. You'll win something now.
Two points. When George Bush was in his presidency, I think he had a 90-day reprieve on the corporate tax, and then he rescinded it to 15%. $400 billion came